maybe get AI to get something. All right, looks like we're live and a few seconds in, so we'll wait for people to come in. And fantastic. And I actually just realized, I don't know. Yeah, let me know. I don't know if I can see how many attendees there are from my perspective, but maybe you can see Austin. You can see the comments, which is great. So that part's working.
Yep.
But yeah, so while we wait, how's everything going on your end?
Hey, it's going well. It's going well. How'd you fare the blizzard of 2026?
Oh, it was it was pretty crazy. I was surprised it kept snowing for like 12 hours or something like that. And we spent all Monday afternoon like digging out, and I feel like there's all these like trenches like all over the place. But it's, could be worse. I felt like it was I guess it was 16 inches, but it feels like a lot more. And then we got a dusting of snow, like probably like a solid inch or more. So it was, easy to clean up, but it was amazing to wake up and fresh snow on top of everything again. So
yeah. I've got family over in Massachusetts, and I tell you, it looks like Antarctica over there.
Wow, what happened?
I mean, they've got probably 6-foot drifts at some places, waist high, and snow, had to dig themselves out. And, I'm from Florida. So I saw the comments here. We've got Todd. It looks like he's from Florida too. So yeah,
he's
Todd,
enjoying the warm weather.
You and I, we got got a high of 68 here today in Tampa, and then Anders up in New York. So
yeah, you were telling me earlier that it's getting cold at night though.
Oh yeah. I mean, got to cover the strawberry plants, so they don't get the frost.
But what's up with the strawberry plants? I didn't know it was like a garden thing in Florida.
Yeah. So strawberry season right around now. You just got to cover them when the frost comes in, and I tell you, nothing's better than a homegrown strawberry, nice and red all the way through, sweet. If you're from Florida, you've had a Florida strawberry, homegrown. You don't touch. Nothing touches homegrown.
Yeah, no, I want to try those sometime because we just get the regular strawberries, but I don't think I've ever found a market around here which has like the good kind. But I probably haven't looked hard enough. Honestly, what it is. If I looked hard, I'd probably find the real thing. But
looks like Rick said he's in Toronto. He said not that 16 inches high yet.
Wow, I would think Toronto would be covered with snow and has been for a while. But when I went to school in upstate New York, like we wouldn't see the ground till like April, and we come back from winter break and there'd just be snow everywhere, and that'd just be that way. And then they could definitely handle stuff. But I was there for I think maybe the first time in their history where they shut down the school, and there was I felt like there was, I don't know if it was 4 feet high or what it was. I just felt just insane. Just walking, I'm a tall guy, but I felt like the snow was piled up high on either side. So yeah, that was wild. Wondering how much longer we should wait. It's about 4 minutes.
I think we dive in. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I think we've got a good base here, and we got the pleasantries out of the way, right? We join, and but yeah, let's go ahead and kick it off. So, Anders, thanks again for inviting me on to ask you some awesome questions today. And hopefully provide some great value and insight to our audience, both live and if you're tuning in after the live.
Yes.
Still, bring in your comments, direct messages. We're here to help, and anything we don't cover, we want to make sure we help you. So, Anders, I've learned that you specialize in transforming IT vendor spend, right? Specifically WAN, internet, voice, other IT vendor costs, bringing, I guess you could say, chaotic messes into streamlined, cost-effective systems, right? Well, we felt, it'd be great to also share more specifics, as it sometimes can be skeptical, right? A lot of people can kind of have that skepticism around
for sure
billing and savings, and, especially 2026, it's the wild west with AI and, all types of things, right? So today we want to talk a bit about, where IT budgets are quietly leaking, specifically how CIOs, CFOs, even COOs can recover up to 50% of vendor spend. So, I guess a good way to start is tell me a little bit more about your background, Berlin Pacific. How'd you even get into this?
Sure. Well, I have a background as an IT infrastructure admin. I also got to be a sales engineer for a while selling network management software, which was really cool. And I learned there a lot about visibility and the importance of visibility. And one of the things I noticed was companies want visibility into their network, but they don't have a lot of visibility into the details of where all their money is going every month to companies like AT&T and Lumen. And now, of course, we have things like VoIP seats and things like that. And so that's one of the things I noticed. And, companies, they'd get these bills every month and they'd look at them and, they'd approve them. And then if there were some big changes or differences between bills, they'd investigate and then they'd renegotiate their contracts every so often. And that was all I had time for. And then I realized, well, I really like this side of things. I like spreadsheets and analyzing data. And so I started helping companies with IT vendor spending, particularly in the telecom area. And I was able to branch out and help in some other areas. But that's a really good example because I found upon investigation that I could, in fact, help people save money. And we would typically, if companies spending like $100,000 a year, $2 million a year on like WAN, internet, voice services, we would save about 50% of that 6 or 7 figure budget. And that was a pretty amazing figure to me. And I'm surprised it still holds, but I think that it speaks a lot to the complications of the telecom industry and the way they bill. But we're also seeing similar, but not quite as dramatic results in a lot of other areas because, now we have cloud costs, software as a service costs. Now we're looking at AI, and these are all like recurring vendor spends. And I've even helped companies with other types of less obvious types of recurring vendor spend as well. And I'm seeing similar results from following the same process, and which was interesting to see some common principles here.
Yeah, I mean, bills, they're complex, opaque, time-consuming. I'd say everyone wants to find savings, but sometimes it's a needle in the haystack, right?
And a lot of times they don't give you the data you need in the bill to actually make any different decisions than what you're making today. You have to really get more data than what they give you in the bills, which is a big hassle, as you can imagine.
While we're into the bills, I guess, where do those savings usually come from when you find them?
Well, I found that within there's usually 3 types of ways to save money. You can fix billing errors, things where they're not charging according to the contract. That's one big bucket. And then let's use telecom as an example. But within telecom, there's still a lot of billing errors. Maybe not so much in like your AWS bills, but you're still looking at around 5 to 10% of your budget can often be billing errors. Sometimes it's less than that. Sometimes I've seen some real horror stories. But then with using telecom as an example, like voice and data, like your WAN bills, you could have like 25% could be unused services, underutilized services. So, there might be those circuits which, AT&T, forgot to disconnect when they did an upgrade. And then one of the more dramatic examples I had was a client where they had a whole data center worth of circuits, which had been billing for about 18 months after they left. And I discovered that when I got there. It was spread across all these different bills. And it was part of a really large spend. But these things happen. I'd say another 25% of the budget could be on under sort of overpriced services where you're not getting the discounts or the pricing other people are getting. And one of the challenges with a lot of IT products is nobody knows what anything should cost. And so that's really challenging. And so I have developed a network of experts who can help you determine, how to save money on, things like Microsoft or Oracle or your WAN or your voice services. And that way you can negotiate from a position of strength. So that's been really helpful. And so that's usually where the savings come from. And I would say, depending on the category, it can vary, but, people are definitely seeing, 20 to 40% savings looking at other types of IT vendor spend, like cloud or SaaS seats, and there's definitely people are still trying to figure out how to manage AI costs as well.
Yeah. I mean, we know that people have skepticism, right, on finding hidden costs, especially for telecom. But it sounds like you put it, no one really knows what fair pricing actually is, right? And they're not going to tell you, right?
Yeah, exactly. They have no incentive to tell you where you're getting. Well, they're going to tell you you're getting a great deal and everything, but they're not going to tell you the stuff where there are other people down the road are paying 50% less than you.
Yeah. No doubt. I guess what are the biggest myths, going around for in the instance of companies believe that, I guess what are some of the biggest myths companies believe about managing IT vendor costs, right? So,
well, I think there's a lot of myths around whether or not it's possible to save, and I think one of the issues might be that a lot of times people hear from sales reps saying, and really the sales reps just want you to buy something new, and then maybe you're going to end up with another new set of bills, which are going to have similar but different problems than the last vendor. So a lot of people are, of course, skeptical, but actually it turns out that you can save money on your current vendors and keep them. And that's what I focus on, is helping you keep your vendors and get better quality of service. And then if you want to bring in new vendors, I can help you do that and help you get great pricing. So I think that's a big myth. Another myth might be that the only way you can save is getting rid of billing errors. I think that's often the case within telecom, because a lot of people, they hear from people about how to save on your WAN and stuff like that. And billing errors are a problem, but it's only maybe 10% of the problem in a lot of cases. So we can save. The big issue is really unused, underutilized services and getting better pricing. And I think a real issue people are seeing within IT vendor spend in general is there can really be a lot of misalignment between what the vendor wants to sell you or what you're currently buying and repeatedly buying and what your business needs are. And you have to really link the two of them together. And that can have a huge dramatic impact. And so usually people think in terms of aggregates, like, oh, okay, well, hey, it's my cloud spending. I have to spend this amount of money, or I have to spend this amount of money with Microsoft, and then I get, X amount of value, or, it supports these business processes. But when you dig into the details, you notice that a lot of the line items you're spending money on are actually not relevant to your business needs today and for the foreseeable future. They might have been a great purchase or something which made sense at the time, but things are changing over the years. So I think those are some of the big things there, which we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the real myth. There's nothing we can do to improve this, right? That's what everybody thinks. And then, question.
Yeah, I think that is probably the big myth, is nothing we can do to improve this. Yeah.
Yeah, the question I have for you, we can use telecom as an example of managing vendor costs, for example, right? Do the same principles apply there as they would for other vendor costs?
Yeah, I think so. The same principles are, let's make sure there aren't any billing errors. Let's make sure that everything we're buying is actually aligned with what we need for the foreseeable future. And then the third one is, let's look for opportunities to get better insights into pricing and see if there are like discounts we can be, which we're eligible for. And sometimes too, there's might be like, slightly different services, which are a better fit and would actually, be more cost effective, et cetera. Just kind of having that open mind and being willing to listen to people and hear what they have to say. And that can have a huge impact. And I think believing it's possible in a lot of cases is kind of the first step, is believing that more is possible. And especially if the way you typically do things is, hey, we look at the bill every month. We kind of compare it to last month, and we renegotiate our contracts every few years. That's usually a good foundation, but we found that on top of that, there's huge amounts of cost savings, which can be found if you're spending a lot of money, like, well, by a lot, I mean $100,000, millions of dollars a year or more, and there's complexity there. That's what we found. It's the complexity generates a lot of hidden cost savings. And yeah, so it definitely applies to all sorts of IT vendor spend, and actually areas outside of other types of vendors as well, outside of the IT department.
I mean, it sounds like it comes down to visibility, right? And
yeah,
and all of that. So why would visibility and why is visibility so important when you say, hey, managing overall IT vendor spend? Why is that visibility so important?
Well, yeah, visibility is absolutely critical. I think that's the core thing. A lot of companies don't have visibility. Often what they'll do, actually a great example is, they'll have a client gave me a bill for $7,000 from Verizon. They're like, this is a very important bill. Like, we don't want anything to happen to this, so you need to keep paying this. I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. Yeah. So I got the details from Verizon, and this was actually back in the day when I had to actually call Verizon, and there wasn't great information in the portal. but I got a breakdown of what the bill was for. And when you looked at the actual bill, it was 3 pages, and it would be like, oh, it's for $7,000 from Verizon, but it wouldn't tell you anything about what it was for. And so when I got the details from Verizon, it turned out that about half the bill was for really important stuff for like their data and WAN connections for their headquarters. So absolutely, you got to pay that bill every month. You can't have the headquarters go down. But the other half of the bill was for obsolete services they weren't using anymore, and nobody had any clue because it wasn't in the bill. And that's an extreme example. Most people have bills, but a lot of times people have bills which are this thick if they were printed out, and there's just an overwhelming amount of detail, and it doesn't tell you the details about the spend and the important things you need to know. So our first step recommendation is always create an inventory of everything you're buying, break everything down to a granular level so you see all the billing line items. And so you want to have like a really complete inventory. This is usually way more detail than what people have in their ERP systems. So this is super important. And once you have this inventory, then you can go and do the steps I recommended earlier in terms of looking for unused services, underutilized services, unoptimized services. And then also now you know what you're spending money on. You can look for opportunities to get better pricing. Sometimes you'll even make discoveries like, hey, why are we paying, for this service over in this city at this price, and we're paying for a much higher price at a different city. And that's hard to know if you're looking at all these different PDFs and moving them back and forth and trying to keep in your head. But when you have visibility, you have a database of everything you have, and you can look up, and you can see, I want to see all my WAN circuits. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Why do I have like 3 AT&T circuits in this office? Like normally I only have one. Okay, why is that? And then you can tie every single cost back to business needs, as well as checking it for billing errors and seeing if you can get better pricing. So yeah, that's why visibility is so foundational. Hopefully that was clear.
Yeah, I mean, so sounds like without visibility, you really can't tell what's essential, overpriced, or just unnecessary. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I would say that that's definitely the biggest sign of a lack of control and governance over spend is that if there's, if it's a simple spend, like you're like, oh, hey, yeah, we pay, this company $10,000 a month, and we know exactly what they do. Basically what they do is they send Bob over to help us, do some things. Okay, that's very easy to understand. But if that $10,000 a month is composed of, 20 different billing line items, then there's a lot of complexity. So not having that inventory is a huge sign that there's a lack of control and governance. There's really no way to justify and validate individual charges. You haven't tied costs back to business needs, and it really creates a foundation for savings, and it enables fast identification of errors and overpricing. So one of the things I found is that almost 95% of my clients, maybe, or something like that, never have any kind of inventory at all. They have a sense of, what are all the bills they pay. But if they do have an inventory, well, then it's really great, because then they just send that over to me, and I can then quickly discover if there are, in fact, additional opportunities for me to help. And I've done this a lot with primarily companies where they have like a wireless company who's helping them with like billing errors and helping them sort of keep things up to date. And then I would go in and I find real opportunities to like optimize and to negotiate better better pricing for everything they're buying. And it's really easy to do that once you have visibility. And people can share it with me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you can spot the issues vendors won't disclose out the gate, right? But then the inventory is really creating that foundation of savings, and then you can also see, hey, there's the costs that aren't tied back to the business needs.
And that's the first step we do, is we make sure that inventory gets created when we do work, and then also when we have partners and experts who we bring into our clients who help with other areas where I'm not an expert personally. That's really the foundational step. We always make sure that a proper inventory is being created for our clients, and our clients can use that if they want, but really it creates a foundation for savings opportunities. And that's something which is really time consuming and tedious. It requires grabbing a lot of data from vendor portals and integrating it. And people just don't have time for that. People have an IT department to run, and they got to make sure that technology is up and running. So we help manage the spending on the back end.
Yeah, I've got a question on technology and
Mhm.
well, about AI actually. But before I get there, what is the largest savings you helped a company achieve? I'm sure everybody's wondering.
Well, I think the biggest success we had, and this was over several years, was we ended up finding close to $1 million a year in annual recurring savings, which was
Wow.
impressive figure. They spent a lot of money, obviously, to get to that figure, and in order to get there, we built an inventory from scratch for them, and we went in and we identified all sorts of unused circuits, and we looked for overpriced services. We figured out everything that was off contract as well. We discovered so a couple examples of things we found. One was, Lumen had a contract where they'd charge $400 an MPLS port for this client, and it turned out that quite a few of the MPLS ports, not all, but quite a few, were actually being charged anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a port. So definitely not what's in the contract. But if you had printed out all their bills every month, you would see that there was quite a lot of detail to get in there. So they did not catch those. There'd also been a lot of, I think, turnover as well at the company, so people weren't super familiar with what should be done. And what we also found is we found a lot of unused and underutilized circuits. They had, I would say, almost layers and layers of networks. So they had kind of their original networks, and then they had backup networks and development networks, as well as production. And then they were upgrading them, and then they moved out of a data center. So they were the one where we found almost over $300,000 a year in unused circuits in an old data center. And so in phase one, just by focusing really on getting rid of unused and underutilized services and fixing billing errors, we found $500,000 in savings, which were super easy to implement.
Yeah.
And then we ended up discovering another $500,000 a year, which we took some time to work through and help the client with. And this was, it was great. So I was very proud of that. And I got a nice note from my boss there saying that his boss was happy because they were saving a ton of money and they hadn't had to do any work, which is really always my goal. I just I gave them some really easy to understand suggestions, like, hey, can I take care of this for you? And they were like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, please get our money back from Lumen for all those billing errors. And oh wow, we had no idea. All those circuits were there. Yeah, let's definitely get rid of those. So that was that was a lot of fun and really helpful.
That's awesome, man. I mean, that's definitely some significant savings, and in 2026, especially. I mean, I can only imagine how awesome that would be, especially the way prices are for everything. But we're talking about tools and software applications. We'll talk about AI for a bit, right?
Okay,
So
sure.
AI, modern tools. I mean, everyone can kind of copy paste something in, right? And poof, you got answers. So I guess what's your take on it? With AI, modern tools, it's constantly evolving, but why are billing errors still happening?
Well, yeah, that's, I guess, two different questions. I had the opportunity to talk to a few people who really work in the back end of these billing systems, and I've kind of wondered if it's on purpose, some of the stuff they do, and because sometimes it does seem like they just are happy to bill clients for services which don't exist or aren't really being used, et cetera. And it turns out a lot of it is that actually it's actually confusing to them too, to some degree. And they just have these very archaic billing systems. And the good thing about telecom systems is that they are very reliable. They've been built to work, and they just keep grinding along. And so the downside of that is that things are kind of resistant to change, but it also means that when things do get changed, it tends to be quite sticky, and you don't kind of have to worry about it, especially on the landline side. Obviously, it's a different story with mobile and maybe some of these VoIP companies. So that's, I think, why the billing errors are still there, is because they don't have a lot of checks and balances to figure out if there are problems, and then sometimes it's a little hard to make the changes when every time you do a new contract. So you really have to get have somebody go through thoroughly and double check every single billing line item, make sure it's being billed correctly. Sometimes discounts don't get applied properly. Sometimes taxes and surcharges aren't applied properly. as well, and that can really add up. So I think that's why the errors are still there. And then in terms of, well, how would you use AI today? I think there's a lot of things you could do. But one of the problems was just saying like, whoa, why don't we just, I don't know, take all our bills and throw it into some sort of AI system. One of the big issues is that there's the data you need is actually not in the bills almost every single time. Now, there's a lot you can accomplish with that for sure. And definitely there's a lot less hallucination, but what we found really helps is, and what I would look for is tools which really help you with the entire process. So you would want something which can go in and grab all the relevant data from the vendor portals, do it on a regular basis, update everything, and create and update your inventory, create a full valid inventory. You also need to tie in the contract documents as well, and then definitely AI can help with that for sure. But you need to make sure it's tied to each billing line item is tied to a contract, and that you can validate it. And I think another thing too is that AI isn't going to actually take action for you. It's not going to usually. I mean, at some point I might get there, but you still need somebody to look at the cost savings, talk to the stakeholders, make sure that makes sense, make sure you're buying what the organization needs for the next 2 years, do that type of planning. But then the other big thing is you actually have to work with the vendors and follow through and make sure that everything gets implemented. So in theory, there is definitely, I think people will create tools which will help streamline that process and kind of do that workflow. And you might even have a nice AI which says things like, hey, looked at your bill, there's something kind of weird here. Can you sync me up to the, portal so I can grab some data? And then they might say things like, hey, Bob, remember, how, we told you about that thing. Well, the vendor still hasn't fixed it. So, you need to call them, So, AIs might be able to, help with all that workflow, but there's really a much bigger process than just reading a bunch of bills and getting answers. You need more data, and then you also need that execution and follow through with the vendors and going after it every month until everything's fixed. But there's a lot of potential with AI for sure, and I'm have been reviewing some of the tools people have out there and finding it very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, tools can surface the issue, but people are still fixing them, right? And even then, you can look at the vendor side. I mean, they may not even fully understand their own billing over time, right? It changes, contracts change,
Yep.
Things can go missing, things can get disorganized, right? So still,
they often
require the human element.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting stories I've seen around that. One is, for some of these larger companies like Verizon, part of the reason why billing works the way it does is because they have all these sales incentives and sort of ownership and quotas and sort of what counts towards sales reps quotas, et cetera. And so there's a lot of like political problems anytime you revise some billing because you don't want to break the way how accounts are assigned to people and how people are compensated. So that's the challenge with these big corporate accounts. Another, oh man, that's so funny. I think it's spaced it. There was another funny story about, oh well, I forgot what the other one was, but there was, the original point was about AI systems. Oh, yeah. Anyway, we'll have to move on to the next point because I forgot the second story.
Hey, no worries. So I do want to get into, before we run out of time, I know we're getting close to the other, the half hour here, but I want to leave some time for Q&A, right?
Yes.
So anybody out there live, if you have any questions, throw them in chat right now. We'll try to pop them up here on the screen. And we'll give you an answer. But while we're waiting for those, Anders, how would you summarize how leaders can recover substantial amounts of IT vendor spend?
Yeah, sure. I think the kind of too long didn't watch version of this is if you're a leader, you want to make sure your team, your organization is getting granular visibility into the details of IT vendor spend within a category. So we use telecom as an example here, but this applies to cloud, SaaS, AI spend, et cetera. So you don't want to just think in terms of aggregates, like, okay, this is my cloud budget. You want to have everything broken out somehow. Not that's not something you should do. That's something your organization should be doing. Your vendors should be helping you and supporting you and doing. And so once you do that, once you have that granular visibility, you want to tie each individual cost back to the business need and the customer outcomes that are being served. So, and so hopefully it's kind of obvious why this is given the stories, but if you don't do this, you're going to see things like, a data center worth of circuits where, you haven't been in there for years. And that's because that individual cost hasn't been tied back to anyone. There's no owner for it. And then, but once you have visibility, you want to have two types of experts. So one expert is somebody who could be internal for sure. And you could create the inventories yourself, but you could also have outside parties do it. We do have a whole done for you service, but you try to do it yourself. You could have a lot of success if you have a lot of time. And so your internal experts, you want to make sure that every single thing in your inventory in that category is being billed correctly, eliminating billing errors, which may or may not be important depending on the category you're buying from. But the big thing is you want to make sure you're not paying for unused and underutilized services. And you want to see your experts to look into, they're going to understand how these services are used, how they help with business needs, and they're going to see how can they optimize, how can we align the services with business needs. And they might also be able to suggest lower cost configurations of services. And this will all be with your current vendors and it will achieve the same outcome. And so they'll be able to help with that. So that's the type of expert you'll want internally. Now, another type of expert you'll want is someone who knows how to identify where you're paying market rate and where you're paying above market rate, and will help you get lower prices and discounts, including between big contract renewals. So there's a lot of savings. That's another big myth, is people think you can only save by waiting for big contract renewals, but actually you have to manage the bills in between the contracts, and the bills are not the contracts. There's often a lot of flexibility within contracts in terms of what you can do to save money in reality when you look at the details. So you need this second type of expert. Now, often these experts are not going to be internal because, whatever the people are at your company, whatever they're really good at, maybe they're an incredible expert at managing Microsoft costs. Well, they probably don't know as much as another expert does who's done 100 deals in, let's say, telecom, or someone who's done 100 deals in Oracle, or somebody who's done 100 deals in AWS and really knows how to do this. So you want to bring in experts who really understand not just your company and what they're buying, but also they understand the market that you're buying from, and they know how to get you the best opportunities. So if you follow this, this will identify a ton of opportunities in today's spends, which are complex, and you're spending 6 and 7 figures. You'll find a ton of opportunities following that, and you can actually apply this. If you're a CFO, ask supply chain and procurement, all those guys, to follow a similar method and bring in outside experts to look at any other substantial vendor spend, which is outside of IT. So from a decision maker standpoint, this is really easy. Delegate all this work to some experts. They create visibility. They identify potential cost savings, and then you have the decision makers in charge and the stakeholders. They approve the savings, make them really easy to understand, and then you'll want the people you've delegated this work to. You want them to consistently follow through to fix the bills and implement the savings, and have that consistency, that sort of project management. It's they're very simple projects, but somebody has to follow up every single month with the vendors. And so we offer this as a done for you service. And I pretty much always save 50% of a 6-figure, 7-figure telecom bill, but I also have people I work with who can help with other types of IT vendor spending. We follow a similar process, and we can also introduce experts who can help with just maybe sometimes it's helping with negotiations and things like that for contracts or getting better pricing. And so we can help with all sorts of IT vendor spend, like Microsoft, Oracle, AWS, and so that's what we do. And I think one of the things too I pride myself on doing is I want to augment and enhance what you're already doing. So whatever you guys have already done in terms of managing bills, we'll be able to come on top of that and show you additional areas which you didn't realize had potential, or areas you didn't have time to do. Because that is one of the things we've noticed is This is very time consuming. So that's why a lot of people don't do more than they do, because the vendors just make it too difficult to dig in deeper.
Yep. No, I like that. We also have another question here from in FinOps. We're currently suffering from waste cleaning paralysis, sometimes because the technical staff need the proper mandate to do it. Other times because they inherited the undocumented environment, legacy systems that they don't know much about, and they're afraid of breaking production with, let's say, $50 a month. Ideal resource savings. Of course, here there are many other reasons. Do you see that in your field?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is very much the case. You need to. So what I do is we create an inventory, and then we identify like who are the stakeholders, and we try to create some sort of ownership and try to talk to them and say, okay, hey, who is in charge of this? Who are in charge of these individual things? So you want to tie each individual charge to an owner, and you need to track down who that owner is. And honestly, it's as simple as that. And if the department in charge, IT has to be on board with that and say, we are going to track down the owner. Now, I've had clients where they're very busy, and they say, hey, we don't have time for this. We're 3 guys, we got dozens of locations. And I'm like, hey, no problem. I'm going to go talk to the individual stakeholders and say, hey, this is what we found. Like, this is, seems to be out here. Help us, figure out what's going on here. And you just have to make that a mandate and let people know, like, hey, what's this production system and who owns it? And you need to talk to me about why we need it still. But you got to do it in a smart way, in terms of, and that's why it's important to have an expert who understands what the services are, what you're buying, why you're buying them, not just a bean counter, and they can make intelligent comments and say, hey, those who are buying these things, kind of makes sense, but this seems a little anomalous. It's a little bit different. Other things, can you explain like why it's necessary? And then we'll just document it so we won't bother you again. And that's another key part, is that once you create that inventory, you can start documenting it, and then it becomes easier to maintain going forward. But Rick, I don't know if that answered your question. Was there something more specific you had in mind?
He also asked what are the main reasons, but I think you covered that. So
yeah, I hope so. But if there was something else, I would curious to.
Yeah, Rick, we'll reach out to you as well, and maybe we'll pick your brain and see what you're thinking, and maybe we can come up with something.
Yeah, let's see John's CTOs' comment. In terms of visibility for traditional organizations, the challenge is the services that's consumed by non-IT departments that's charged under IT cost center. Yep, there are many tools and services lingering around for ages. Nobody has a clue. Yeah, you can do a rip-off strategy and then onboard only in West Tabs. That can be the way to do it. And typically, I think part of it is just having a demand that we are going to get to the bottom of this, and then you just keep asking questions, and eventually you kind of figure out like who owns what, but we do see that is the problem. If you don't have an inventory, and you aren't managing it, it just becomes this giant cost center, and everything's just loaded in this big bucket of slop, and people just have to pay it every month, and that really ties down the IT budget. I've heard a lot of people say around 70% of an IT budget is just kept on maintenance, spent on maintenance, like maintaining the same old. And a lot of that is because there's a lot of stuff which is being maintained or money is being spent on, which isn't really relevant to the business anymore. And you got to go in and align those activities consistently. And, depending on what it is, sometimes I think with cloud services, you got to do it all the time. With, let's say, landline telecom services, we do this, big project. It's going to last for, years, but you still should look at what you're doing, at least once a year, and something like that, which is relatively stable. Just kind of, do a sanity check around everything. Yeah, John was saying that the rip-off strategy is the last approach when repeated inventory affects failed. There's no response from departments yet. Yeah, definitely that will work. You can scream and sometimes too there's ways to do it where you kind of like unplug it and see who yells and you just plug it right back in and then assign it to that person. So I don't know if we have any other questions today.
I don't see any coming through right now, but I say let's leave on a strong note. If someone thinks their vendor spend is fine, what would you say?
I think the big first thing is, do you have an inventory? How are you guys managing it? What does the governance look like? And if you do have an inventory, I would say, well, have you allowed outside experts to at least come in and validate it, especially validating your pricing, getting outside experts to let you know who aren't, don't need to sell you something, but who can help you get better pricing. I'd really get their advice. Always be open to new ideas. But if you have a bunch of outside experts who are looking at everything, you have inventories, things are regularly being reviewed, things are regularly being aligned to the contract and to business needs, then yeah, you're probably doing great. But I do also always recommend bringing in another set of eyes, and if you're well organized, your data is well organized, so they can definitely take a look and come back to you and say, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense, or oh, hey, there's this kind of new thing you haven't heard of before, which would really help you.
Yep. It sounds like if I say worst case scenario, you validate, you can validate what they've already optimized.
Yes.
Or best case, you can recover something meaningful like savings. So I think if today's conversation hit close to home, you're spending a lot, or you just want to see where you can save some money on your telecom, internet, vendor spend, give us a shout. Anders would love to take a look for you. He offers also complimentary assessments, no obligation, no disruption, just kind of same team, same dream, right? So we'll get in the trenches, and thanks again. Thanks for joining the live. Thanks, Anders. Again, if you're viewing the live after or live, don't forget, shoot your questions here in the comments. We'll reply to them, or just direct message Anders, and we'll tackle it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully this was really helpful, and you learned a lot. I also wrote a book, Principles of Telecom Expense Management, which goes into all the details of how this works. But also, if you're spending a lot of money and want to see if you can save money and we can help you take some money off the table, we'd love to look at your telecom, internet, IT services, and we'd love to take a look for you. And we offer a complimentary assessment where we do all the work. There's no obligation, there's no disruption to your team, and we're finding that people can save a lot of money without having to switch vendors or take on a new project, and they don't have to wait for new contract renewals. And so the worst case, right, is you'll validate that you're already optimized, and best case is you'll recover meaningful savings. And we'd love to do this work for you. And similarly, if there are areas where you're spending 100K plus in a category like cloud or SaaS or looking at AI, we have experts who can definitely help reduce the total cost of ownership and increase capital efficiency and ROI. So yeah, please reach out to me, and I would love to help. And even if it's just chatting and throwing around some ideas and letting you kind of know what I've seen work for other people. So I'd love to help out.
Cool. Thanks again. Thanks, Anders. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
See ya.
Okay.